Hello and welcome to Bite My Pie. These days more and more services seem to be moving to the cloud, but there are still many advantages to running your own server at home. Speed, security, knowing where your data is actually stored, to name just a few. Setting up a server can be quite an involved process, but it doesn't have to be. And that's where Amahi comes in. In this video we're going to install this easy to use free and open source software to create our very own home server. So if this sounds appealing to you, stick around. Okay, let's jump straight in. To get started, open your web browser and we're going to search for Amahi. It's this one we want, www.amahi.org. From the home page you can click the big Get Started Now button. As it says, it's free to sign up. First we need to create a username. This can be whatever you like. So let's say that for demonstration purposes I'm going to use Bite My Pie. Just make sure that whatever you choose you don't have any spaces between the letters. And I'd also suggest keeping it all lowercase as well. This username will become a subdomain of yourhda.com. What this means is that if you choose to access your home server remotely, you'll do so by using this URL. So here we have bitemypie.yourhda.com. Next you need to enter your email address. This needs to be a valid email as you'll need to verify it to set up the account. Next we need to create a password and then we need to confirm it. By the way, rather than keep clicking in each box, you can press the tab key on your keyboard to move down to the next one. And then we just need to answer the question in the last box, which says here what is 4 plus 3, so I'll type 7. You can view the terms of service by clicking here, and if you're happy to continue, click Start Now. Okay, I don't want Chrome to save the password. Before we sign in we need to go to our email that we just provided, and you should see a message from this no reply at amahi.org. If you don't see the email within a few minutes, check your spam folder. Inside the email is an activation link, so simply click this to finish setting up the account. You'll be taken to a sign-in prompt where you can either enter the username you just created or your email address, and then pop in your password and click the sign in button. To fill in the network settings we need to know a little bit about our home network. So if you type CMD into the search box and press enter to open a command prompt, and then we need to type the command ipconfig and press enter, we can see that this computer has got the IP address 192.168.0.65, and we can also see that the default gateway, or in other words the IP address of our home router, is 192.168.0.1. So make a note of the default gateway address on your network. Now we need to choose an IP address for our Amahi home server. This needs to be something that's not currently in use. So in this case I can't have it ending in 1 or in 65. To find a free IP address we're going to carry out what's known as a ping test. So if you type in the word ping, P-I-N-G, followed by a space, and the address you'd like to use for your home server, I'm going to try 192.168.0.10 and press enter. This is what you want to see, reply destination host unreachable, because that means that the IP address we just tried to ping is not currently in use, and therefore we can use it for our new home server. Once you've found a free address on your home network, make a note of that as well, and then you can close the command prompt. Right, now that we've got that information, we can fill out these settings here. So the existing network gateway is the IP address of your router. In my case, that was 192.168, and then if I change that to 0.1. And then the address I'm going to use for my home server is 192.168.0.10. When you've entered your IP addresses, you can click Next. Now we need to enter a local domain name. Since this is for your home network, you can call it what you like. I'm going to call it the highly original home.local. It's standard practice to use the domain extension .local on a local area network, or LAN for short. What you don't want to do in here is put the name of an external website. For example, if you were to put something like google.com, it would prevent you from accessing the real google.com, as the devices on your home network would think that it was being hosted locally. When you're happy with what you've chosen, click Next. Here it's allowing us to double check the settings we've just entered, and assuming they're all okay, we can click Create your HDA profile. This code is very important because we'll need it as part of the server installation process, so jot it down and keep it somewhere safe. You can even send yourself an email by clicking this link here. When you're ready to proceed, click on this link for the install instructions. It tells us the latest stable release at the time of this recording is Amahi 11, and it also shows us the relatively modest hardware requirements. So let's click on Get Started. As we're carrying out a fresh install and not an upgrade, we need to click on this link, Directions to install Amahi 11, or whatever the version number happens to be when you do this. And if you scroll down the page, you're looking for the download section. It's the Amahi Express CD that we're after, and you can see here that version 11 of Amahi is actually based on Fedora 27 Server Edition. So next to Direct Download, click on the ISO link to begin the download. I'm going to save it to my downloads directory. That's going to take a few minutes, so I'll pause the video and come back once it's complete. Okay, now that we've got the ISO file, we need some software to enable us to copy it to a USB stick. And for that, in our web browser, we're going to search for Rufus. It's this top link, rufus.ie. If you scroll down the page to the download section, we don't need to grab the full program. Instead, we can download the portable version here. We can save that to our downloads directory as well. Right, let's close the web browser, open File Explorer and navigate to the downloads folder. Make sure that you've got a USB stick plugged into your computer. You're going to want one of at least 1 GB in size. It's a good idea to make a new folder to put the Rufus portable program inside. I'm just going to call it Rufus. Then we can click and drag the program into it. So let's go inside the Rufus folder and launch the software. Click on Yes to proceed, and we don't want to check for updates, so you can click on No. Right, it's auto detected my USB stick. It's set to disk or ISO image, which is what we want. So we can click on the select button, browse to the downloads folder, click on Amahi and open. Make sure that the partition scheme is on MBR and that the target system is BIOS or UEFI. We can leave the volume label as is, and likewise the file system and cluster size can stay on the default. And now that we're ready to copy our ISO image to the USB stick, you can click on Start to proceed. Rufus just needs to download a couple of extra files to continue, so we can click Yes to allow that. Here we get a warning that all of the data on the USB stick's going to be erased, so make sure there's nothing important on there that you want to keep, and then click OK. This process will take a little while, so I'll pause the video and come back when it's complete. Great, now that that's done we can close the program and right click on the USB stick and eject it. A quick word about the hardware before we install Amahi Home Server. You'll probably want something with a lower powered processor, as typically servers tend to run 24/7. While you could go out and buy new hardware, you could also repurpose an older machine. You don't need a truckload of RAM. Amahi will run on as little as 1 GB, but I'd recommend 4 GB if it's available. The main thing you want is storage, so in terms of hard drives, the bigger the better. Right, let's install our home server. Pop your USB stick into the computer you want to install Amahi onto, then turn on the power. You want to make sure it's set to boot from the USB device, not the internal hard drive, and then you should see a menu like this. So use your cursor keys on the keyboard to move up to install Amahi 11 and then press enter to select it. As this computer is going to be our home server, really you want it plugged in with a cable to the router. It's not a good idea to run it over wireless. Okay, let's run through the installation wizard. First we need to select our language and then click continue. On this screen, anything that's highlighted in red needs to be taken care of before we can begin the installation. For the Amahi server setup section, if we click on that, this is where we need to enter that installation code that we made a note of earlier. So pop yours in now and then we can click on done. Next I need to verify my keyboard. If yours isn't listed, you need to click on the plus sign to add it. I just need to select the English UK and click done. And now that begin installation is no longer greyed out, we can click on that to proceed. This may take a little while as it downloads packages and carries out the installation, so I'll pause the video and come back when it's done. The computer just automatically rebooted as part of the install process, and as you can see on the screen it's now continuing the installation. I'll pause the video again and come back when there's anything else to report. Okay, the computer's just rebooted again. When it gets to this menu here, you can just let it automatically boot on the default option. Congratulations, if you're seeing this logon prompt, you've successfully installed Amahi Home Server, and you can unplug your USB stick. Now that the server is installed back on our computer, we need to set it up and configure it. One of the great things about the Amahi Home Server is that this can all be done through a web browser. Moving forwards, our new server will process all the DNS requests on our local home network. What that means is that instead of typing in an IP address for a device, you'll be able to type in its name instead. So since our new home server is called HDA, which stands for Home Digital Assistant, we should be able to reach that by typing in http://HDA and pressing enter. If that doesn't work, don't worry, it just means that your computer isn't picking up its settings from the new server yet. If that's the case, you can reach it through its IP address, which hopefully you made a note of earlier. So in my case that would be 192.168.0.10 and press enter. Doing so will display this extra message. That's just letting us know that we're currently accessing the server through its IP address. If I flick back to the other tab, as you can see, if we use the name HDA, we don't get that message. To effectively use this new server as the central hub for our home network, we need to let it take care of any DHCP or Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol requests. When a device connects to your home network, it's given an IP address, and this is taken care of by the DHCP server. Up until now, odds are it's been your router that's been doing that. As we now want Amahi to take over that role, we need to turn it off in the router's settings. So if we open a new tab, let's do that now. If you've never accessed your home router before, you need to type its IP address into your web browser. If you recall, we found it earlier when we were looking for our network's default gateway. So let's enter it now. In my case, that was 192.168.0.1. As you can see, I'm running a pfSense router. Your interface will vary depending on the model. You'll need your username and password. If you're not sure what they are, you can usually find them on the back of the router itself. So enter those now and log in. You need to find your DHCP server settings. On this router they're under services here, and then we want to turn it off. So I'm going to take the check out of the enable box and then scroll down the page and save my settings. When you've done that, you can log out of your router and close the tab. To make sure that your computer's now getting its DHCP address and DNS settings from the home server, you can either reboot the PC, or alternatively we can open a command prompt by typing cmd in the search box and pressing enter, and then enter the following two commands. The first one is ipconfig space / release and press enter. And the second one is ipconfig again, but this time space / renew and press enter again. That's pulled in the new connection information from the server. You can see not only is it giving us an IP address, it's also showing us the name of our local network that we set earlier. So if we close both the command prompt and the web browser and start again by typing http://hda and pressing enter. This time, even if it didn't work before, you should now be looking at the Amahi home server login screen. And if you've made it this far, you can give yourself a pat on the back because we've now completed the most difficult part of the setup. Like your router, you'll now need to leave the server on all of the time for your home network to function correctly. Okay, let's get logged in. The username is lowercase admin, and as this is the first time accessing the system, we need to create a password. So jot yours in here and then confirm it, and then click on the create button. From here we're going to click on setup to get things up and running. You can see on the users tab that initially we only have this one user, admin. Let's add another one by clicking on new user. Create a username. I'm going to go with bytemypi. Then type the full name into the next box. Give the new user a password and then confirm it. And when you've done that, click on the create button. And simple as that, we have our new user. Before we go any further, it's worth skipping over to the settings tab and checking the advanced settings box here. Then click OK, as this gives us access to some useful extra features. Now let's go look at the shares tab next. By default, Amahi handily sets up several shares for us. We can view extra information about a share just by clicking on it. Out of the box, all users can access these shares and they can also write to them. If I wanted to make a share read-only, all I'd need to do is remove the tick from writable. More usefully though, if we take the tick out of all users, we can now set the individual permissions on that shared drive. You can see that the admin account has full read-write access, which is usually how you want to leave it. At the moment, bytemypi, the new user I just set up, also has full access to the books shared folder. Let's say we didn't want this particular user to have access to the books shared drive at all. We can simply deselect the tick under access. There's also an option to allow guests access to a shared drive. This would obviously mean that anybody on your home network would be able to access it. The visibility checkbox allows us to decide whether a share is hidden or not. If I untick the box, I'll show you what this does in practice. To do this, I'll open Windows File Explorer. Now if we click in the top bar and type // the name of our home server, which is HDA, and press enter, Windows then asks for the name of an account to connect to the server. We could enter the admin account to basically give us full access. You could use an account that you've set up, so in my case Bite My Pie, or alternatively you could enter something else entirely to see what access a guest would have. So to try that out, I'm just going to enter guest for the username and guest as well for the password. If you'd entered one of your server accounts, you may want to tick this box here to remember the credentials so that you don't have to enter them again. But since I only want to view this as a guest, I'm just going to click OK. So as you can see, all of these shared folders are visible even to a guest. That is except for the books shared folder, because obviously we've made that one hidden. But even though I can see the rest of these shared folders, because I'm only logged on as a guest, if I was to try looking inside one by double clicking on it, I can't actually open it without entering an account that has permission to do so. So this shows that guest access isn't actually enabled by default. Let's cancel out of that and close File Explorer. Back in the Shares settings, next down the list we have Permissions. This is a handy feature because sometimes on a network share you may get a file that's particularly awkward to delete. Clicking on this icon will reset the permissions on any files or folders within the share, and that should fix the problem. Next down we've got tags. You can see we've got music, pictures, videos, etc. Books doesn't fall under any of those, but if we were to scroll down to one of the other shared folders and expand movies, you can see that that's ticked. Below tags it lists the actual location of the shared folder where it actually resides on the home server. As you start to fill your server with content, you may want to come into one of the shares and click this Get the Size to see how big that share is. And then there's the option to add extra parameters if you want to get really advanced. Clicking back on a share's main bar will hide its settings. To the right of the share's names we have their locations. You may have already gathered that the location is how we search for the share across a network. So when I had Windows File Explorer open before, I typed // to reveal the server's shares. So here in File Explorer again, if I want to go to a specific share, I can go // HDA / and then the name of the share. So let's say I want to try movies and press enter. And this time I'm going to enter the credentials for that Bite My Pie account that I set up. So if I just pop the password in there and click OK. And there we go, I'm now in the movies shared folder, ready to start setting up content. I could create a new folder in here and call it My Favorite Films. Now if we go back to // HDA, now that I'm connected to the home server using the Bite My Pie account, you can see that it's even automatically set me up with a home directory for that account. But if we go back again, what I actually wanted to show you is that obviously we still can't see the books shared folder because we hid it. But what we can do, so long as the account has permission to access it, is type in /books after the name of our server and press enter. And I can still access that shared folder even though it's actually hidden on our network. While it's very nice that Amahi has automatically created these shares for us, you might not want them all. So let's say I'm never going to store any TV content on the server. If I click to expand that, we've got this option over on the right to delete the share, in this case delete TV. And if I click on that, we get a warning that we're about to delete the share. Note that although the share will no longer be available, any files that you've got stored inside of it will not be deleted. Also note that you cannot undo this action. So if you're 100% positive you no longer want that particular share, click OK. And just like that, TV has now gone from the list. If on the other hand you'd like to add an additional share, say for example you've got a hobby that you'd like to create your own shared drive for, if you click on the new share button down here, you can give it a name, so I'll just call it hobby. Then you can decide if you want this share to be visible or hidden on your home network, and also whether you want it to be read only or not, and then click on the create button. And as if by magic, we now have a hobby network share. Naturally, if we expand that, we can set the various permissions. So I can choose who has access to this new drive and precisely what kind of access they have. I hope you're starting to see how useful this level of control can be on a home network. By setting up multiple user accounts, you could give family members different levels of access to the data on the server. Before we leave the shares area, let's just take a quick peek in the settings tab. By default, this workgroup name is just set to workgroup. It's a good idea to set this to the same name that we used for our local DNS name earlier. So if I click on that, in my case that was home.local. You don't need to enter the extension, so for me I just need to put home and then click on change. Next along we have the disks tab. I only have one hard disk in the server, so that's not very exciting. It's listed as dev SDA. You can click on the partitions tab to show you how any of the hard drives in the server are partitioned. As you can see from the sizes in the total column, my server has a 1 TB hard drive. This has been split into 3 partitions, SDA1, SDA3 and SDA5. The first is the boot partition, which as the name suggests contains the files necessary for the server to boot. Next is the root partition. This is where the Fedora operating system resides. Then there's the home partition, which is by far the largest because it's where the data in the shared drives is located. Right, let's move along to the apps tab. The apps section is a nice touch in Amahi as it allows us to add extra functionality to our home server. If we flick over to the installed tab, you'll note that out of the box there aren't any apps installed. So let's go back to what's available. Scrolling down the list, you can see that there's quite a selection in here. When you find one that you're interested in, let's say we'd like to set up a web calendar for example, click on it to reveal more details. Clicking on the plus sign will take you to the Amahi website where you can get more information. Let's close that tab and go back. And then when you're ready to install an app, it's as easy as clicking on the install button. Now that that's installed, it gives us the link here to access it, so you could make a note of that. But by leaving this box ticked, it also lists it in the dashboard, and I'll show you where that is in a moment. Obviously, if you no longer want an app, you can click the uninstall button to remove it. If we scroll back up, we also have this link here to get apps. It's worth noting that the software in this list is available at no charge, and this is where you would install the free apps from. However, if you'd like access to the full range of apps available, that's where Get Apps comes in. Clicking this link will take you to the Applications section of the Amahi website. You'll need to sign in to see the prices of any paid for apps. So just enter the username or email address and then the password of the account that you set up earlier, and then click sign in. There's some quite useful information in here, and we'll take a look at some of this a little later in the video. But for now we just want to click on the apps tab at the top of the screen. As you can see, we now have prices for the apps that are chargeable. If you decide you want to make a purchase, you first need to add credit to your account, which you can do by clicking on this button here. But I'm going to sign out and return to the home server. If we look in the installed tab now, you can see I've got the web calendar app on my server, and I can click on an installed app to get more information about it. So to use this particular app, I'm going to need a username and password, and it tells me that those are admin and admin. This plus sign here is different from the one below. The bottom one is what we already saw, where it gives us an overview of the app, whereas if I click this plus at the top, it's more specific information, in this case with regards to the app's user account and password. Now if we go back, let's go take a look at that dashboard I mentioned before. To do that, we just need to come up to the top and click on Home. I'm not sure why we get this latest news section block here when the content is very old. These articles all link to the Amahi blog, whereas the current content all seems to be on the Amahi forum these days. But this is the part we're interested in. We've now got this new shortcut to the web calendar app that I just installed. If I click on that, it should launch the web calendar, and what do you know, it hasn't. But if you notice, the URL in the address bar has changed to web calendar. I'm actually glad that that's happened, because I'll show you the procedure to perform that should fix it. With any newly installed app, you want to give it a little bit of time to get up and running. Usually just a few minutes will do before you try to access it. But if that doesn't work, it's the good old off and on again. Yes, you guessed it, we're going to restart the server. So make sure that you're back on the HDA home server tab and not the web calendar one. Then we're going to go back into setup, onto the settings tab, and in here we've got these two power buttons. So we've got shutdown and restart. So obviously click the restart one and click OK to proceed. Give it a moment or two for the server to reboot. It's always a good time to grab a coffee, and then you can refresh the web browser to see if it's back online, and if the page refreshes, you're good to go. If it doesn't, you can try refreshing again until it comes back up. Okay, let's go back to the dashboard and we'll try the web calendar again. And there you go, just like that, we're back in business. And if I use the username and password of admin, I should be able to log in. Splendid, one successfully installed app. So even if you don't fancy a calendar, hopefully you can see how easy it is to set up an app of your choice. Clicking this Try the All New Applications title will take us back to the Apps tab of our server. Right, next along we've got the Network tab. In here first we've got the DHCP leases, which shows us any devices connected to our home network. In my case at the moment that's just my PC here. Then we have a fixed IPs section. So if you wanted to add any static non-changing IP addresses on your home network, you can do so here. Then we've got DNS aliases. This is where you can set names for your devices. There's already some in here for the home server, the router and the web calendar. These can be very useful as it allows us to communicate with these devices on our home network using the names rather than the IP addresses. To quickly demonstrate this, if I open a command prompt, let's just move that across to the side and run a quick ping test, and I'll ping HDA, our home server, and press enter, you can see that even though I've pinged the name of the server, it's replying on the IP address. So we've got HDA responding on 192.168.0.10. If I wanted to make a new entry for another device, I could click on this button here. Then lastly, in the network section, we've got the settings tab. This contains the configuration for the DHCP server. So obviously it's turned on. By default it issues an IP address to a device connected to your network for 14,400 seconds. It uses OpenDNS as the DNS provider. You can click the drop down list here if you'd rather use another one. The gateway IP address is that of our home router, which we set earlier. At the bottom we've got the range of addresses that can be handed out, so anywhere between 100 and 254. If we bring up the command prompt again, just move that to the side, I can demonstrate that my computer's been given an IP address within that range by typing ipconfig and pressing enter. And there you have it, the IP address ends in 194, which is obviously between 100 and 254. By the way, any of these values can be changed by clicking on them, but unless you've got a good reason for doing this, it's probably best to leave them alone. And the last tab is settings. We've dipped into this details section a couple of times already, but aside from turning on advanced settings or powering off and restarting the server, you can also set the language in here. Guest dashboard is a nice feature. If you check this box here, it allows anybody on the home network to access the server's dashboard. Now don't panic, that doesn't mean they can get into these settings, but if you've set up some server apps, it allows them to access any shortcuts you've created to those. So let's just take a quick peek what that looks like. To do this, we just need to log out of the server. So if we come down to the bottom and click on where it says log out admin, and as you can see, we're at the HDA address for our server, but instead of seeing the login screen, we're viewing the Amahi dashboard. If I just refresh the page, this is what anyone on your home network will see if they type the server's address into their web browser. There's no link at the top to set up, so they can't get to your server's settings, and even if they click login down here at the bottom, they won't have the admin account information to get in that way either. To log in as admin when you've got the guest dashboard enabled, you can either click the login button as I just did to get to this screen, or alternatively you can type in HDA/login into the address bar. So if we go back to the dashboard, you can see that anybody on the home network would be able to access the shortcut for the web calendar. Okay, let's log back in as admin. Once you've entered the password, you don't have to click the login button, you can just press the enter key on your keyboard. Now that we're logged back into the admin account, we can click the setup button that's returned to the top bar, and let's go back to the settings tab. Obviously, if you don't want to leave the guest dashboard turned on, you can uncheck the box there. Lastly, on the settings details tab, we've got some system information, so along with version numbers, we've got uptime, which tells us how long the server's been switched on. Let's flick over to the settings servers tab. This will show you any services that you've got running on your server. At the moment, this is just the file server. This is the software that operates the network shared drives. It's known as Samba, and we can click on it to show us more information. If you ever have a problem with your file shares, it's worth coming in here and clicking on the restart button. Rather than restarting the whole server, this will just restart the file sharing service. And then the last tab in the settings section is themes. There are 3 themes built in. We've got Beach, Air Jordan and Air Jordan Vertical. By default, Amahi is using Air Jordan, but if you fancy a change, just click on one of the others. That's it for Amahi's settings. Now let's familiarise ourselves with the rest of the server's web interface. On the top bar we've got Home, which as we saw earlier takes us to the dashboard. Next along is a search box. This can be very handy as you start to fill up your server with data. To demonstrate, I've put a picture in the pictures shared directory. I've called it dog, so I'll enter that into the search bar, and then I'll click on the HDA button to search the server for it. There it is, dog.jpg, and we've got the exact location underneath. If you search for a file and it doesn't show up, try entering the name and the file extension, so in this case that would have been dog.jpg. If the file is an image, you can right click on it and copy the link address, and then if you open a new tab and paste that in there, you can view your picture. Or alternatively, if you right click on the little folder icon instead and again copy the link address, open a new tab and paste that in there, you can view the directory that the picture is located in through your web browser. This could be useful if you'd got several images in that directory, as you could select each one in turn and then go back to click the next. If we close that to go back to our server tab, there's another nice touch if we return to the search box. Let's enter the search term dog again, but this time click on the web button. It goes out to Google to look for results there. Back on our server, next along we've got setup. Hopefully the setup section is starting to look familiar now. Next in the top bar we've got help. Clicking on this takes us to the Amahi Wiki, where you should be able to find most of the answers you're looking for. And then at the top right of the Amahi home server interface we've got the apps link, which being part of setup should again be recognisable. On the bottom bar there's a link to your control panel. This is part of your Amahi online account, so we need to sign in using the credentials we created earlier and enter the password. We saw this control panel briefly before when we were looking at paid for apps. A couple of things worth noting in here. If you do plan on accessing your server remotely, you'll need this dynamic DNS address. If you recall, we created this at the beginning of this video. To get started setting up your home server to be accessible from the internet, you can check out the remote access section on the Amahi Wiki. The other thing worth noting in your account's control panel is the alerts section down here. If you've got any alerts, you can simply click on them to see what they are, but I'm not going to do that now as it contains sensitive information. Okay, let's sign out of that and close the tab. Next on the bottom bar we've got a feedback link. You'd need to be signed into your Amahi account to use this, but in doing so this gives you the facility to send feedback to the team behind the software. Next along we've got the wiki. Unlike the help section we looked at earlier, clicking this link takes us to the main page. Then we've got Tracker. From here you can keep an eye on the latest bug and feature updates. Next along we have a handy troubleshooting link. This is divided into common problems. Then if we scroll down a bit we've got issues related to specific releases of Amahi, and then below that there's helpful references. If you don't have any luck in troubleshooting, there's a live help option. Amahi has an IRC or Internet Relay Chat channel, and to join it you simply need to create a nickname. I'll just go with help me please, then tick the I'm not a robot box and complete the lovely captcha, then click start to join the channel. To post a comment or question you just type in the box here and then press enter to send it. If the IRC doesn't come to your rescue, you can try the forums. There's lots of topics and posts going on in here, so hopefully somebody will have the answer you're looking for. If you want to post a message, you'll need to log in with your Amahi account. Then at the right hand side of the bottom bar, as we saw earlier, this is how you log out. And that ends our guided tour of the Amahi home server web interface. Okay, we've already seen how to connect to our home server from a Windows PC. Now let's look at the process on an Android device. If I launch Google's Play Store, there is an Amahi app, but as I've never had much luck with that, I'm going to show you another way. So we'll search for File Manager, and it's this one we want by the Flashlight and Clock developer. So let's install that. If I come out of the Play Store, there should be a shortcut on the home screen. If you don't see it, have a look in your app drawer. Right, let's open the File Manager app. We need to give it permission to access the files on the device. And inside the app you should see this remote icon. Let's select that. To connect to our home server we need to add a remote location, and the protocol we're using to connect is SMB or Server Message Block. So for host we enter the name of our server, which is HDA. And to connect to an individual share we want to put / and the name of the share after it, so I'll go with pictures. Next you need to enter a username. While you could put in the admin account, I'd suggest using one that you've created yourself on the server. I'm going to go with Byte My Pi. Then pop in your password for that account. If you wanted to connect as a guest instead, you could check the anonymous box. And then we need to select More. Entering the domain name of your home network is optional, but if you want to, you can put it in here. And again, although optional, I'd recommend entering a display name. This will allow you to easily identify your network shared folder. So I'm just going to call mine Pictures and then choose OK. You can see straight away that it's connected to the Pictures share on my server. I can select the dog photo that we saw earlier. If I go back and select the little house, now if we go back into the remote section of the file manager app, you can see that it's saved the connection to the pictures directory on the server and it's now accessible from the Android device. Let's go back once more. Obviously we could go through this process again and add other shared drives. Be aware that your Android smartphone or tablet will need to be connected to your home Wi-Fi in order for this to work. Also note that the free version of the File Manager app does contain relatively unobtrusive ads, but if you really don't like advertising, for a one-off fee these can be removed. If you happen to be rocking an iPhone or an iPad, fret not, because there's an app available for you too. It's called FE File Explorer and is just a download away on Apple's App Store. Just before we wrap up this video, I'd like to cover a couple of troubleshooting steps in case things don't go entirely to plan. The first is with regards to accessing the home server remotely if the web interface stops working. To do this, we need to open the command prompt on Windows, and we're going to use the SSH or secure shell command. So type SSH followed by a space and the name of the admin account, which is admin at, and then you can put either the IP address of the home server or its host name. So I'm just going to put HDA and press enter. Because this is the first time we're connecting from this computer in this way, we need to type yes to say that we want to continue and press enter again. Then you just need to enter the password and press enter once more. And if you're looking at this line here, admin at local host, followed by a flashing cursor, you're successfully logged in to the terminal on the home server. We can clear the screen by simply entering the word clear. It's never a good idea to just yank the plug out from any running computer, but that goes doubly so on a server. So the command I'm going to show you here is how to reboot the server from the terminal. And it's as easy as entering two words. The first is sudo, followed by a space, and then reboot. Then when you hit the enter key, all that's left to do is pop in the admin password and press enter once more. The second troubleshooting step I'd like to cover is how to set up a static IP address on your computer. This is just a precaution because if you recall, we turned off the DHCP service on the router and let the home server handle it. Now while this usually shouldn't cause you any issues, if your home server was to ever stop working, you'd need to do this in order to access your router to turn its DHCP server back on. A telltale sign that your computer is not automatically getting an IP address can be seen if we hover down on the taskbar over the network icon, as it clearly states not connected. Don't automatically assume that this is a problem with your DHCP server though. It could equally be a flaky Wi-Fi connection or a faulty network cable. If you've got another device to hand, it's always worth trying that before assuming there's a problem with your home server. Right, to configure our computer to use a static IP address, we need to click the Start menu and go into Windows Settings. From there we need to access Network and Internet, then Network and Sharing Center, and lastly click on Change Adapter Settings. Now depending on how many network adapters your computer has, they'll be listed in here. As you can see, I've only got one. This is a wired connection. If you're using a laptop, it'll have wireless, but it may well have a wired one as well. You need to right click on the adapter that your computer is connecting to your home network through, and then select Properties. In here you're looking for the Internet Protocol version 4 or IPv4, so select that and then click on Properties. So the adapter is currently set to obtain its address automatically, which is as it should be. What we need to do is select the Use the following IP address option, and then if you click in the first segment of the IP address box, we can type in a static address. The router on my network is on 192.168.0.1, so I'm going to set this to 192.168.0.2. By the way, I'm just pressing the full stop key for the dots. Then if I click at the start of the subnet mask box, it's automatically filled that in for me. Typically a home network will have a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. So if you're not seeing this, you'll need to fill it in. And then the default gateway for my network is 192.168.0.1, so enter yours in there. You don't need to put in a DNS address in order to access the router, but just so that we've got the internet and everything working, we can enter one here. Let's go with Google's 8.8.8.8, and then we can click OK and click Close to finish. At this point it's worth doing a refresh on the network adapter to make sure it's accepted the changes. To do this you could reboot the computer, but it's quicker to right click on it and choose Disable. And when it's greyed out, right click on it again and this time select Enable. At this stage I'd leave all these windows open because this is only a temporary measure. From here you can open a web browser, enter the IP address of your router and press enter. And from here you could turn the router's DHCP back on. Once you've finished, don't forget to go back into the network adapter, right click Properties, back to IPv4 Properties, then just return the settings to Automatic and click OK and Close to finish. While you could disable and enable the network adapter again, there's not a lot of point this time because even if it hasn't updated, it'll do so when you next power cycle the computer. So let's just close all of the windows. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you're starting to see the benefits of running your own server at home, especially with one as easy to use as the open source Amahi. But maybe you'd sooner set up a network attached storage box instead of a home server. Historically, these devices were even easier to set up due to their relatively limited functionality. Yet as NAS technology continues to advance and servers, in the home environment at least, become ever more straightforward to use, the boundaries between the two are increasingly beginning to blur. If you'd like to compare and contrast, check out another of my videos entitled Set Up Your Own Network Attached Storage with Open Media Vault. There's a link in the description below. Whichever route you take, have fun expanding the potential of your home network. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And if you'd like to be notified when I post the next one, just click on the bell icon. Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care.